This is the follow-up video for the last thing that we did, which was binomial expansion. I just want to do a few more example questions with you to kind of give you some more context for the different types of questions you might be asked to do. So we talked about this question at the end of the last video on binomial expansion. So here's another question, 4b minus 5 to the 6th power. And what we're asked to do here is find the third term. You'll see this a lot with binomial expansion questions where they're asking you to find a particular term. So instead of doing the whole thing, you're just trying to find one of the terms. And so to think about the third term, what we have to do is we have to imagine that the first term is going to be 6 choose 0, right? Because we said that they always start with the number choose 0. So here it was 4, so it's 4 choose 0. So here it's the first term is going to be 6 choose 0. Then the second term is going to be 6 choose 1. So the third term is going to be 6 choose 2. Okay? So we set out by starting that coefficient. And then what we do is we say, okay, we know that the 2 here matches with the second term's power. So the second term, minus 5, is going to be squared because it matches that. And then if that's the case, because the terms have to add up to 6, 2 powers, then that has to be 4. So we have 6 choose 2, 4b to the 4th, and minus 5 squared. That's our third term. Okay, and then you have to just work that out. So 6 choose 2, you will find, if you do it on your calculator, it's 15. And then you get 4 to the 4th. 4 to the 4th is 256. And then b to the 4th. And then minus 5 squared is 25. Okay, and again, when you're bringing that power in, it's applied to both the 4 and the b. And then you just multiply those three numbers together. So 15 times 25 times 256 gives you 96,000. So that's how you find a particular term. All right? So we're going to try a couple more of those. Let's imagine, here's this one. It says a plus b to the 9th, and I want the 6th term. So what we're going to do, this is a little bit easier because there's no numbers in front of these. There's no like 3 or 2, whatever. So the number is going to be a little bit smaller, but we're going to start with 9 choose 5. Okay. And again, if it's a 6th term, this is one number less than that because you're starting with 0 at the first term. So it's always one less. So you have 9 choose 5, and then it's going to be, since that 5 becomes the power of the second term. So the second term is b. So we have b to the 5. And then you find this power by understanding that they have to add up to 9. All right. So that's 4. And then we just have to figure out what 9 choose 5 is. Okay, so 9 choose 5 is 126. And again, you can find that on your calculator. Okay. So that's another example of just finding a particular term. Okay. Imagine that, again, this one, it says I want to find the 7th term this time. So it's 1 minus 2t to the 14th. I want the 7th term. So we're going to first of all go 14 choose 6. Okay, that's going to be our coefficient. And then the 6th is going to be on the second term, so 8 is going to be on the first. So the first term is going to get an exponent of 8 because this 6 shares this 6, and 14 minus 6 is 8. Okay, so hopefully you can see where we're getting that. 14 minus 6 gives me 8, and then the 6 goes there. And then we just figure out, okay, what's 14 choose 6? So that's 3003. 1 to the 8th is just 1, so it's basically just multiplying by 1, so we leave it out. 2 to the 6th, it's minus, but the negative cancels because of the even power, so it becomes 64, and then t to the 6th. And you just multiply now 3003 by 64, and you get your answer, and it's 192,192 t to the 6th. So you're going to have in a binomial expansion, the first type of question is the question like we did in the last video, which is find all of the terms. Just expand this. The second type of question is something like that, where it says find a particular term. Okay? And then the last type of question you're going to see is, and I think I have an example of it here, there we go, is an example of a question that looks like this, where it says find the constant term. Okay? So instead of finding a particular term, it says find the constant term. And the constant term means no variables. Okay, so what you have to look at is you have to look at the powers of these two terms in here. So I have x squared, and I'm going to multiply that by 2 over x. And you can see if you just multiply these, see how that's going to cancel one of the x's? So I'd be left with 2x, all right, if I just multiplied that. So that is not constant because it has a variable in it. So if I can get, though, this to have twice the power that that does, then I'll have a constant term when I'm done. So in other words, if I can raise this, we know it has to add up to 12. So if I put this to the 8 and that to the 4th, now when I multiply this out, instead of getting 2x, you'll notice that this becomes, just to show you what happens, that is going to give me x to the 8, and this is going to give me 2 to the 8 divided by x to the 8. Okay, so that's going to cancel those, and I'm going to be left with just 2 to the 8th. Okay, which I think is 256. So if you put the powers like this, it will give me a constant because the x's cancel. So what you're forced to do when you're looking for a constant term, what you have to do is you have to figure out what combination of powers is going to give you that x canceling. Once we know the combination of powers that does that, then we can write out the term, because the term is going to be 12 choose 8, okay, because it comes from the second one, and then x squared to the 4th and 2 over x, sorry, to the 8. So we can write it out like this once we know that. Okay? So what we have to do is try to figure out what combination of powers is going to make the x's cancel when we're done. If this is twice that, then obviously this has to be half as that. If this was x cubed in x, then this would have to be 3 times as big, and so on. So you're just looking for what makes it so that the x's cancel out. And then what you do the same thing as finding just a single term, because that's what we're doing. We're finding one term, but you're doing it with setting the powers instead of just saying, I want the 7th term. So having the powers set for you. So in this case, you have to think about what combination up here, what combination of powers is going to make the x's cancel out. Okay, and then we just do the rest of it like we did before. So 12 choose 8 is 495. That term becomes x to the 8. This term becomes 256 over x to the 8. And again, if you've done it correctly, the x's cancel. Okay, so then you end up with just 495 times 256, and that's 126,720. So that's the other type of question you might be asked to do, which is to find a constant term. And a constant term, again, all you're doing is figuring out what combination of powers makes them cancel. So for example, we just did another one, okay? And actually, let's scrap that example. Let's just do a different one. So imagine I asked you to find the constant term again. So we're still looking for the constant term, but this time we're going to do x minus 3 over x. Okay, so what I have to do, I'm going to raise that to the 6th power, let's say. Okay, so what I need to do now is I need to figure out, since these are both 1, I just have to split this in half so that they keep the same ratio of powers. So the constant term is going to be x cubed and then minus 3 over x cubed. And that means I'm going to have 6 choose 3 as my coefficient. Okay. So then you're going to take your calculator to figure out what 6 choose 3 is. And then I just don't know where it is on this calculator. Should be in the menu here. Just give me 1 second. It's not going to work. Never mind. You can figure out what 6 choose 3 is, and then you have x cubed, and then times minus 3 over x cubed, and that gives you whatever this number is, multiplied by x cubed, multiplied by minus 27 over x cubed. And what happens is these x cubed cancels, and so you end up with whatever that number is, whatever 6 choose 3 is, multiplied by minus 27. Okay, and that's going to give you your final answer. And my calculator is frozen at this point, so let's see if it'll let me now. There we go. So we're going to go to probability and ask it to do a combination. And it's 6 choose 3, so it comes out to 20. So we're going to end up with 20 times 20 minus 27, so this is 20, and this is 20. This is 20, and that gives me negative 540. Okay, so that's how we find the constant term. So that should give you a pretty good idea of what you're going to be asked to do in terms of binomial expansion. So there's questions that you can practice from the textbook that we're operating with, but that is the idea of binomial expansion using combinations. We don't use permutations in this at all, but we use combinations to do binomial expansion. So you can try those questions, and then we will move on.